who was wondering what she, the princess, would do, the girl fixed her beautiful eyes on the guests. Just then she rose from the back of the chair, and tilting her head forward and looking at them provocatively, asked who they were. A girl with a short hair, hesitantly looking at the princess, called her older sister, to which she told her not to show any excitement. She wondered if she had been told exactly about this princess. She had washed herself before coming, and now she looked like a completely different person. She wondered why the queen did not give them such important information when she sent them here. How then she loudly introduced herself as the first Princess Patricia and said that this time she would forgive her. But next time, she asked to be careful in her statements. She asked if she was asking who they were, but they were not the servants who were sent here, she said. The sisters looked at each other contentedly. The younger one nodded approvingly to the older one. When Samira said that this was true and asked if the princess from Sylvanas didn't know at all about such simple rules of etiquette, her sister said not to worry about it, saying she had too high expectations. Theodore noticed that they suddenly changed their behavior after deliberately praising their opponent. This is the nature and style of speech of royals. It would be better to prepare weapons and engage in battle. Their speech, like the swords of knights, he himself still cannot get used to their acting, and the masks that the palace aristocracy tries on. He has many enemies in the castle. Because of him, the princess is inconvenienced, he thought. He must definitely protect her before everything calms down, and advised her to keep quiet. Alexandra frowned and wondered irritably if it would be rude if she showed off her abilities a little. She definitely had to ask him to become her business partner. Michael said that he was the third prince. How then the princess, looking at them emotionlessly, said that it seemed to her that there had been a misunderstanding. Patricia asked what misunderstanding she was talking about and laughed at the fact that she would also make excuses. How stupid it was. Princess Sylvanusa pierced the first Princess Arugo with a menacing and cold gaze. She said that she did not ask them who they were and that it was a monologue with herself. The girl was surprised. Then the princess explained that it seemed to her that they had already met somewhere. Instantly, the first Princess Patricia realized where they could see each other and was extremely amazed and opened her eyes. It was impossible, as she remembered, the girl thought. Patricia bit her lip and thought how she could remember her in that chaos. Did she really ask her because her face remained in her memory? Princess Alexandra was silent for a while, giving the princess the opportunity to understand everything, and smilingly turned to His Highness Michael. The guy looked at the beauty in surprise and responded to the call with interest. Then Alexandra, fingering strands of hair near her face, asked him if they had met before. The guy, blushing, said that it looked like that, and for sure it was like that, because he had been to Sylvanas before. But the girl with silver hair said that she didn't know this. It seemed to her that they had not met him in Sylvanas. The elder sister of the Slavs tensed, concerned. He asked when they could meet him again, whether it was in her dreams. The older sister mentally asked Michael to shut up. He had his brain between his legs. Everything was just confirmed through dialogue. She not only identified herself, but definitely remembered her, saw her there, and realized that the rumors were completely untrue. Contrary to rumors that she had gone crazy and could not learn anything, the girl was amazingly smart. Her husband looked at her in surprise. Her life is a world that was accidentally reflected in water. She remembers and remembers it. A world in which observation and a good memory cannot be avoided. Meanwhile, sitting not far from her, King Irugo watched his son's bride in surprise, and as a result, he smiled approvingly at her. Although she did not see it, his first daughter saw it. The girl could not believe that her father was showing interest in the princess. And if the princess tells her father about what happened in Theodore's palace, then their unexpected visit to the tea room will not be something funny. The older sister understood that it was dangerous, and it was time for them to leave so she could prepare another plan. But suddenly her sister interfered with these plans and shoutingly asked what she was doing. Having a fiancé, she was casually chatting with another man. The girl looked worriedly at the younger Samira, that she was irritated, and still did not understand that things were bad. Alexandra looked up and found that it was exactly the same princess who had insulted her. The princess, with short crimson hair, proudly raised her head up and asked what she was looking at, as if she also voiced her thoughts out loud. She grinned slyly. Her gaze showed hostility. It was a look filled with contempt. But our heroine was in no hurry to get upset. But on the contrary, she thought that she looked like an adult, but thought just like a child and smiled. The little-minded princess thought about what her smile meant and menacingly asked if her words seemed funny to her. This made her angrier. Suddenly, Patricia told Samira to stop and explained that the fourth princess was still small and asked for attention. And while the younger sister was sorting out the relationship with the older one, Alexandra thought that she was savvy. Now there is a battle between the faction of the first Prince Harold, born of the Queen, and the second Theodore, who may take the throne. Unlike Prince Harold, Theodore is born of a commoner, which is his political weakness. However, the more problematic and underlying reason is the old and new factions. A political battle of factions, it was the same in her past life, and she asked if they doubted her belonging to the imperial family. In a measured voice, she asked if they were concerned about her origin. Both ladies were surprised. Looking down with her amethyst eyes, the princess turned to the pureblood princesses of Irugo, and again directing the sharp gaze of her cold eyes, she asked, "They doubt her because they cannot challenge Irugo's position." The maid reported that as she ordered, the princesses and princes went to the main palace. All these words and addresses were addressed to her, Queen Irugo, a woman with blonde hair and red eyes. The maid asked if everything would really be all right. The queen said yes because this was not an official audience, so the visit would look quite normal. And her dear Lisa, the queen of this state, reasoned with a smile, will handle everything well. And especially Patricia. Although she is the daughter of a concubine, she is more savvy than others, which is why she chose her to join her retinue. She said so perceptively, the queen said. And at this time the first princess worriedly said that this was not Irugo's position. She said that the fourth princess was not far-sighted because of her age. The prince also already understood the intensity of everything and supported his older sister, saying that the younger sister did not know how to remain silent or speak when necessary. And while her brother and sister were trying to somehow get her out of this swamp, the girl never realized what her sister and Michael were both doing. Instantly, her dear sister became a stranger to her. Her older sister was always on her side and she did not understand what had happened. The girl did not understand why and how all this happened. Their brother, Prince Theodore, watched all this closely. He believed that this was just pure work. The official audience with representatives of Sylvanus would take place tomorrow, and if the Sylvans found out about what happened today, they would not miss their chance. Then the peace agreement by which Irugo becomes the winner has not yet been concluded. It's like they are walking on thin ice. Trade agreements, rites of passage, and more, even if these are the words of an immature princess. This time Sylvanus will try to use them as an excuse to gain more benefits. Then everything will fall on the queen's shoulders. That's why they are trying so hard to make amends for everything. The only problem was, the prince thought, whose side the father took. The man also closely watched all this dialogue between his children and his son's bride. It was clear from his gaze that he was unhappy with all this. His gaze was directed directly at the children and was piercing. After hearing from the princes, Princess Alexandra was convinced that they would now become quieter. Upon arrival in Irugo, she did not even think to pay attention to their rude actions, but simply wanted them to be quieter. Suddenly, the girl noticed someone's gaze on her and turned in surprise at King Irugo. She saw his gaze on her, and she became restless and wondering how long he looked at her. Everything went against her plans, but she got the attention of the king, which is quite good, and if you think about it, she is worth the surprised attention. If she crosses the line a little, then this will not become a problem of national importance, and the problem will also be that the princess of an enemy state reproaches his daughters. But now she will live in Irugo, so contempt for the king will not play into her hands. Then the girl smiled and mentally asked not to worry. There was nothing to fear. The man smiled back at her approvingly, as if he understood her intentions and what she wanted to tell him. His eldest daughter was surprised at his smile. She imagined that the princess would tell her that she had been insulted and was sad, and that her father would sympathize. Tearfully, she will say that they call her a hillbilly and despicable. This is not just condemnation, but mockery. She herself heard and saw it. Then the father would have said that this would make the situation worse. He would interrogate everyone present and find out the truth, and bring the perpetrators to justice. In the head of the first Princess Patricia, there was a terribly distorted image of everything in her head. If the princess told everything, a war would start, and she was already thinking about taking responsibility. When suddenly the little Princess Sylvanka looked questioningly at Princess Irugo, and she shuddered. Unexpectedly for herself, her imagination ran wild, having met such a girl. She also fell under her spell. And then, having come to her senses, she told Samira to apologize to the princess. The fourth princess asked what this meant. They joked too much about the princess. They were also susceptible to rumors and their own inattention, Patricia menacingly said to act faster. She realized that she was mistaken. Her explosive nature had to be taken into account. All this happened because of her ignorant sister, she believed. And then the girl with a short haircut through her teeth, pulling out the words and wrinkling her face, she asked the princess to forgive her. Alexandra was surprised and tilted her head to the side, emotionlessly saying that it seemed to her that she wanted to say something else. The sisters looked at each other, and the eldest wondered if her sister thought that her face expressed complete repentance. The younger did not understand why she was staring so much. And then the princess with silver hair said that if you think about it like that, it seems to her that she spoke something like a low-born. The girl was very, very surprised. Not only did the princess have a good memory, she also felt ashamed and disgusted that they were directly pointing at her. Then Patricia asked Samira whether this was a sincere apology, and asked her to make a worthy apology. The girl did not want to and did not understand why there should be a lot of thoughts in her head. But her older sister continued to look at her menacingly and furiously, biting her lips hatefully and tense her whole face. The girl looked at her in fear and goosebumps ran across her skin. The eldest said that if she did not admit the mistake, then she asked, would she like to explain herself then? The pressure was growing. And the next moment, unable to bear it, the girl, almost crying, introduced herself again as the fourth princess of Irugo, Samira. She heartbrokenly said that she apologized to Princess Alexandra. Prince Theodore was surprised. It was funny. For the first time, he watched the stubborn and arrogant fourth princess apologize and kneel down. By the way, then he remembered the princess and looked at his future wife. He wondered if she was enjoying the faithful apology. But his expectations were wrong and not justified. As soon as he saw the princess's face, he shuddered in surprise. Looking at her future husband, she smiled very sweetly, making a super satisfied face out of all possible faces. The guy was extremely puzzled by this and did not understand at all how to react. It seemed that she was happy, but it was different from what he had imagined. His idea of the Sylvans was that they cried over every trifle, but in reality he saw a proud bride. The guy smiled and thought that she looked like the one who brought the princess of the entire country to her knees with a few words. And Alexandra thought that Theodore seemed to like it. It seemed that there were a lot of disagreements between the step-relatives. But that was not all. She had to deal with the situation, and gasping, she approached Samira. Unexpectedly for everyone, she said that she did not expect that everything would turn out this way. Then the little princess noticed that she had never insulted her, and never forgave her to apologize. Extending her hand, Alexandra said that she simply asked if she wanted to tell her something else. She also had a manner as if what had happened was nothing to her. The princess said that she was uncomfortable watching the princess kneel, and told her to get up faster. The girl looked at her with large, round eyes and a pitiful expression on her face, and understood that she was generous. Her patient and measured speech and that cold look, Samira immediately realized that she was like her father. The girl, embarrassed by her humiliation and speculation, accepted help from the princess with silver hair. King Nathan looked at the girl approvingly and smiled, thinking that Princess Alexandra was smart. She knows her position and uses it skillfully. This is bold, but within the bounds of decency, and nothing excessive. And the next moment, King Irugo, waving his hand, said that they had enough. His daughter shuddered. Smiling, he turned his gaze to the side and said that they had enough of just standing and told them to sit down. They unexpectedly showed up during a tea party and made a mess. The father reminded them of this, and the children looked at each other and realized that if you look at it like that, then they acted too recklessly. When Elizabeth said that her father was right and asked her sisters and brother why they were doing this on such a joyful day, the sister reminded them that they had been rude to the princess and angered their sister. The girls looked away in shame. The girl with pink ponytails said that she was very sad because they would become one family and they make such a first impression of themselves. She asked what they should do if the princess completely misunderstood everything and disliked them. This interested Alexandra. Unlike the people of Irugo, she has a fragile body and white skin. She and her father have the same turquoise eyes. She said that she is glad that she has another sister. She is the queen's daughter, which means she is Harold's younger sister, so this was the second Princess Elizabeth, the girl realized. Meanwhile, Lisa came closer and asked the princess if she could call her Sasha. The girl was surprised. The princess, with pink hair and eyes similar to her father's, smiled very widely and seemed to be smiling slyly. Our heroine looked at her emotionlessly in response, piercing right through with her cold amethyst eyes. The girl remembered her younger sister with a smile while she thought about the proposal to the king's daughter. She was visited by thoughts of that child who sweetly called her sister back in childhood until they were separated. A girl with golden hair that shimmered in the light and bright green hair ran to her sister Sasha. At that time, they were very friendly and lived happily without knowing losses and everything bad in this world. A wide smile spread across the face of the first princess, and looking up with her cold eyes, she said that of course she could. Elizabeth embarrassedly put her hand on her chest and couldn't believe that she could call her sister. She was glad. Continuing to look at the inspired girl, the princess said that she was very similar to her younger sister. Princess Lisa was simply incredibly happy, and couldn't be happier that she looked like the most beautiful girl in Sylvanus. She was a beautiful and sweet child. Even when she was a little girl, people watched her. Even when I saw her through the eye of the emperor while in captivity, even when she was imprisoned because of her, she was not cute. The man frowned at his future wife and his half-sister, who were talking sweetly together. Elizabeth successfully squeezed between them and looked at her brother with a pitiful and mocking gaze. For her, it was simpler than that. She entered into a political marriage without love, and upon arrival, she met rude and bleeding men. On the contrary, she behaves affectionately with her, reminds her of home, and is also beautiful and sweet. What else could attract her attention? Lisa thought. But if this stupid girl loves her too much, it will be annoying, but nothing can be done. She must be kind to butter up her father. And the next moment she called her sister Sasha and said, "If anything in the palace doesn't suit her, tell her she will help in any way she can." Well, if so, Alexandra thought, then she can help her with her marital debt, and decided that she would be attentive. And the next moment, Princess Alexandra, smiling brightly, thanked Elizabeth. The princess was surprised. She didn't understand whether she had really dropped the formalities, when she herself apologized in surprise and asked if she could talk to her informally. In her heart, the girl vehemently resisted this. She could not allow this. She wondered where such brave people were found, and trembling and trying to smile, she said that this was a little embarrassing. The princess said sadly that she thought that since they were now sisters, was it really necessary to adhere to etiquette in communication between sisters? With sadness in her voice, Alexandra said that she was not very good at this, and it was her mistake. Lisa was surprised. Instantly, she started waving her hand and stutteringly said that, of course, she was sincere. But she thought what kind of sincerity there could be. She could only be Harold's little sister. Then Alexandra, smiling, asked if this meant that she didn't mind then. This really infuriated and irritated Lisa. She mentally cursed and thought only if she was communicating with the walls, since she didn't understand hints at all, and asked if maybe she could too. But Alexandra replied that her younger sister always addressed her with respect. Even at a very young age, she spoke formally. All of Princess Elizabeth's hopes were cruelly crushed with just a few words. Her brother Michael laughed about it. When the sister turned to her brother Michael, the guy shuddered in surprise. Angrily and irritably, she asked what amused him so much and asked him to tell her too. And while the brother uncertainly made excuses and apologized and the sister sorted out friendly relations with him, Sasha looked at the king. The man was talking to the rest of his children, and right in front of him was a plate of friffrin. Elizabeth wondered what she was looking at, and was she really seducing her father? But suddenly she realized what was going on. Instantly she grinned slyly and thought that these Sylvans were funny, and this was the first time she had seen Free-Fran. She thought the princess didn't know that if they brought Free-Fran jelly to her father, he always gave it to her. And then the girl gasped with glowing eyes and enthusiastically said that she really loved this jelly. Her father, King Irugo, instantly shuddered and said that this was exactly the case and already wanted to give it to her. The girl turned to His Majesty and said that he could, as usual, give her his portion. But suddenly she stopped when she saw what was being done with the Free-Fran. The king's eyes also widened when he saw the jelly in front of his face. All his children who were present at the tea party were terribly shocked when they saw what their brother's bride was doing. Deftly putting the sweet and sour jelly on her fork, Alexandra brought it to the king's mouth and, having collected her thoughts, continued what she had planned and told the king to tell A. The man shuddered uncertainly and looked at the jelly approaching his mouth and asked if she wanted to feed him. The princess confidently replied that this was so and addressed the king as a father. The pink-haired girl loudly asked if she was completely crazy. How could she call their dad father and hit the table? Michael told her to watch her behavior. Then, Theodore devastatedly said that the ceremony had not yet taken place, but after the wedding she would become their family, and asked why she could not immediately call him that. Instantly, the prince smiled and said that it was strange to hear such a thing from her if she already addressed her as a member of the family. The princess with pink ponytails couldn't find the words to answer her brother because he was right. How did the princess confidently say that if His Majesty doesn't like this, then she will correct herself? The man looked tenderly at the princess with his cold turquoise eyes, and the next moment he quickly leaned closer to the fork that Alexandra was holding and ate the jelly. The servants did not understand what they just saw. The great king of metal and blood, he is cold and strict and is now doing such a thing. After chewing the dessert, King Irugo told his son's bride that she could address him like that. Princess Sylvanus Alexandra was happy. There was even a blush on her cheek. The servants thought that the king would shout something, but His Majesty ate a dessert that he had never touched before. The princess is truly special. His close pink-haired daughter slammed the table, her hands shaking and her eyes looking wildly at the princess. She believed that this was impossible, and did not understand why she did this. Did she really think that the princess knew her father's secret? The man chewed contentedly, enjoying the taste after a huge amount of time without it. The guests, who had previously been uninvited to the tea party in the person of the prince and princesses, looked at this in shock and stupor. Meanwhile, the princess of the neighboring empire quite easily continued to pick up jelly with a fork and serve it to father. Patricia compared this scene to how a mother bird fed her chick. The king's children were surprised that he had already eaten 3 pieces and wondered how much more he would eat. Then the princess watched the king with a sweet expression and asked if it tasted good to him. The king seemed to puff out his cheeks, continuing to chew the delicious jelly, looking straight into the princess's eyes, and did not answer for a long time. Suddenly, after a little more hesitation, the father said that it was delicious for him. His son Theodore, as soon as he heard this, was shocked. He raised 2 fingers to his temple, and raising one eyebrow, he seemed to mentally ask if his father had gone crazy. He wondered what had become of His Majesty and authority, but the king only looked away. In fact, it's quite difficult to pick up Frin jelly. The princess thought the practice had borne fruit for her. Previously, in Sylvanus, she, with the help of the emperor's eye, saw how the younger sister fed the emperor free Fran. She watched this through the eye of the emperor and, sitting locked up, tried to lift the clay with a fork. Father, she thought. She was doing well too. She wanted to hear her father's praise. And such were the times, Alexandra thought, smiling. But after she realized that he dreamed not of his daughter, but of the emperor's eye, and she abandoned her dreams. Suddenly a loud sound of something glass was heard in the room, and the princess turned her head in his direction. Elizabeth dropped her mug of tea, gasping and saying that it slipped out so unexpectedly. Apparently the cup was unbalanced. Instantly, the girl with pink ponytails loudly asked the maid what she was doing and how she dared to bring the cup without checking it. Her older sister Patricia looked at her and was surprised that the girl who always takes care of her appearance suddenly raised her voice. When the princess with silver hair suddenly looked at the jelly slipping off her fork and thought that she was distracted, Alexandra thought that she was the same, but she would not have the courage to behave like that in front of her father. But there is one secret, a secret that neither the servants nor even Theodore knows. Princess Elizabeth just wanted to eat, which is why she begged for jelly. The whole point is that His Majesty has a secret. His right wrist is wounded, although the wound does not affect his life, but in wartime it can bring turmoil. It could cause concern among the people and undermine the morale of the soldiers, so the king continued to hide it. But since with such slippery food as jelly, suspicion could arise and he chose to avoid it. Only the king's attending physician and Princess Elizabeth know about this, so she usually tells her father that she wanted a little more frinfrain. Hearing this, the king's servant immediately bowed and said that he would immediately order more to be brought to her, but the father said that he would give her his portion. After this, rumors began to spread that recently the king often shared with his daughter that they thought the princess had softened the serious king. Although His Majesty especially appreciates Prince Theodore, among all the princesses he favors Elizabeth the most. The girl happily overheard their conversations about how she was cute, and that she would also be a reliable support for Prince Harold and the Queen. She thought that she would strengthen Brother Harold's position, and everyone would call her her father's favorite. She was smart, but now she didn't even know what to do. The princess thought that if she wanted to protect the Emperor's secret, shouldn't she just let her feed him? At least Alexandra thought so, but all the distraught glances were directed directly at her. From the point of view of Theodore, who does not know about his father's injury, this looks slightly unreasonable. There was nothing sadder than not being able to eat what you wanted when you were sick, and wondering if he would be angry that she was treating him like a child. Princess Silvanusa thought worriedly about the fact that she had little contact with people, so she didn't know exactly how to do it. She was used to formal communication, but she did not know how the interlocutor might react in such a situation. But the king smiled. The next moment, His Majesty said that it was not he who initiated this marriage, but he, indeed, was satisfied with everything. Nathan said that he should repay her for making him laugh, and asked Sasha what she wanted. She was surprised. She was allowed to call him father, and he called her a diminutive name, and it finally happened. "What is it?" her father suddenly asked her, smiling, whether such treatment shocked her too much. Princess Alexandra raised her head sharply and denied it. That wasn't the point, she said, and she knew she shouldn't make a big deal about it. But it seemed that he really became a father for her, and then the girl said that she was just very happy. And the next moment, the princess smiled sweetly back at her father. She was incredibly happy. The girl praised herself. She was smart for plucking up courage again. "Besides," she said happily, when he asked if she wanted something, he was right on target. She had one wish. The servants were terribly surprised when they heard such a combination of words that they hit the mark. Although, in fact, the fact that she fed His Majesty was seen by her through the eye of the Emperor. But she did not expect that she would do it, however. In her world, there is a saying that the goal justifies the action. Nathan looked with interest at his son's bride and asked what kind of desire this was, what she wanted. Maybe lands with precious stones. Then the princess looked at her future husband and realized that now she could finally reveal the true purpose of her visit. Alexandra said seriously that she wanted to clear Irugo of its reputation as a country of barbarians. Absolutely everyone was surprised. Both the king's children and the king himself, and even her future husband, Theodore, did not expect to hear this. But as a result, he smiled at the princess. Alexandra thought that she said it. It seemed that she had proven her skills, because she is a contract that deserves to be sealed even without reading its terms. After a certain meeting that was held with the king, princes, and princesses, she and the groom walked through the courtyard. Theodore thought that everyone was shocked by her statement. In fact, she did not tell him about her plans on the way to the tea room. He looked contentedly at the bride and smiled and thought that if you really want something, you need to grab it. Meg stopped the princess near the stone wall and asked her to wait, asking if she could give him some of her time. But in response, the princess said that she was busy. The prince asked to give him just a minute. The girl became thoughtful. She smiled and said that only if it didn't last for long, and coughed and said if he was asking him to give her time, and offered something. And so, after a while, they found themselves at the table, and Theodore, folding his arms on his chest, agreed with her. She could be useful to him. The prince said that the way his siblings acted out the scene was truly a fascinating spectacle, and the princess agreed with him, and she wanted to hear something from her future husband and pricked her ears sharply. The guy realized that his future wife wanted to hear something from him and said that he had something else. Alexandra asked if he had not seen how good she was and had not heard what request she had for His Majesty. Rolling his eyes, Theodore said that it was in his father's interests and asked what he had to do with it. The girl frowned. The princess gasped and, turning her head away, proudly asked why he called her then, since she was so useless. The guy looked at her with wide eyes and, sadly looking away, said that he knew she was crying. Alexandra, frowning, asked what he was saying and what he was saying, holding a pie and a knife in her hands. When she first arrived as a widower, the prince explained, the royal offspring were above her. The princess immediately understood what he meant. Having spread jam and cream on the bun and placing it on the floor, I thought about why she was crying. The man just turned his head to the side, held it with his hand, and said that in any case, she was the princess of Sylvanus, and was not used to such things. Finishing the delicious bun, Alexandra asked in a calm and familiar tone what if she was used to it, and said that the bun was delicious. When the prince asked what she was talking about, the princess raised her head in surprise and looked up. The man looked at her with a menacing frown and asked through clenched teeth that she said she was used to it. Alexandra was surprised and stutteringly asked what he was talking about and why he suddenly became so serious. And the next moment, she hesitantly asked if he really didn't know that she was in captivity. The guy was bursting with animal horror and surprise, which was what his face expressed. She realized that he didn't know, but how could he not know about it? She didn't understand how this happened because the rest of the royal family knew about it, but he was somewhat indifferent to his own bride. If you think about it, when she came to the palace, she had a vision through the eye of the emperor, and if you think about it, he didn't like her because she was just dirty. Political marriage, Diana, the immutability of the heart, knocking on the table, she thought that she seemed to understand what her client was worried about. The prince of the kingdom of Irugo still could not come to his senses after his bride told the truth about her. And closing her eyes, Alexandra said that firstly, they would enter into a political marriage in any case, so they need to improve their relationship. Pointing a knife at him, she said that she would tell him directly from His Highness Theodore, and asked if maybe he wanted war. Theodore looked at the princess in surprise and coldly asked what this meant. Goosebumps ran across his skin. Alexandra frowned and looked at him seriously and thought that it was better for the prince to answer her honestly. While they are talking like this, Sylvanus is preparing for war, and among her things there is a deadly poison prepared to kill Theodore. At the same time, those accompanying the princess were given a tour of the palaces. The red-haired maid was surprised when a barbarian state, which only knew how to fight, had mastered such an art. At the same time, the red-haired maid's friend suddenly told her that she was completely wrong. The girl woke up from her thoughts. The wheat-haired girl said in embarrassment that it was about that man who was rumored to be a monster. The red-haired girl said that, unlike their expectations, he turned out to be very handsome and did not suit their beggar. The blonde agreed, blushing. How did the maid who received a burn on her face say that, in any case, he would soon lose interest in the princess, because she was a savage who spent 10 years in captivity? The blue-eyed blonde gasped, blushing, and said that nothing could be done. She was the closest maid to the princess. And so she concluded that this is why she should take care of her husband. The maid with the scar said that it was very heartfelt. They laughed enchanted. When suddenly their dialogue was interrupted by a knight with bright yellow hair, he ran out of breath to the girls and called them. The maids together looked back at the man who stood in front of them, trying to catch his breath, and asked what was the matter. Clearing his throat, he shouted loudly that the princess had gone to meet King Irugo. The girls asked in surprise what this meant. The princess's maid with a scar on her cheek stammered, "Did this happen now? And why didn't he immediately follow her?" The guy said that when he heard about it, she had already returned from the meeting, and now she is talking alone with that barbarian. The knight reported. The red-haired maid was furious and thought that this stupid princess still did not understand her place. Let's return to the conversation between the created couple, and then the prince said, "It is obvious that there are people who want war." And the next moment he raised his head and said seriously and majestically that he was not one of those people. The girl looked seriously at Prince Theodore with her cold amethyst eyes and said okay. Immediately, Prince Irugo asked why she asked him about this. Then Alexandra explained that the easiest way to win the war was to kill her. The man's eyes instantly became round in surprise. He clenched his hand into a fist and said that there is more than one way to win a war. Alexandra said that this was true by becoming a spy. She could pass important information to Sylvanus, or by lulling his vigilance, she could try to kill him. But, she asked, why should she risk so much for the sake of Sylvanus, for whom she has no good feelings, and besides, the emperor hates her? The guy directed his sharp gaze directly at her and said, "This means that she did not come here of her own free will." The girl agreed, and the fact that she was kept in captivity was easy to find out after a little investigation. She decided to take the initiative into her own hands and tell everything first. Theodore frowned and folded his arms over his chest. He thought that this was not a topic that could be talked about easily. But the emperor did not want to see her so much that he isolated her. And if this is true, then there is a high probability that the wedding was arranged just for the sake of her death. The princess's friend called out to him. Looking up, Theodore saw Alexandra looking straight at him and said that she didn't want to die and he didn't want to start a war. And she asked what he thought and asked if their interests did not coincide. Golden eyes looked at her in shock. In addition, she can take on the work that he could not deal with during his absence. "Because now there is a battle for the place of heir," she said. Theodore lowered his head and asked if that was what she wanted, to create an alliance to help him. Princess Alexandra happily confirmed this. This was all she needed, and she would do her best to keep him safe. Now the prince realized that all this long dialogue about the trade alliance, about victory, it was all to save her life. But it was a given, he thought sadly. He looked up at the bride and thought how they treated her then. She didn't worry about who her marriage partner was, because marriage is an important point for achieving a peace treaty. That's how, even when she was being bullied, her too calm expression on her face infuriated him. He wondered why he was so angry at the Sylvans. And while the prince was talking about this, the princess looked at him and the last cookie from under her forehead and wondered if she could eat it. But she still ate this cookie and thought that she had not spoken so much for a long time, that her throat hurt, and her eternal smile took a lot of energy. She thought that the fact that she was smiling so hard didn't it look strange? The way to survive was seen through the eye of the emperor. It is better to smile when you convince your interlocutor. In addition, today was her first time conducting such long conversations, and she wondered if she did a good job, and unlike the first meeting, Theodore looks more gentle. Theodore's first impression was a bit unusual. He has a bit of a pervert about him, but fortunately for him, they understand each other. Just then she thought, maybe now was the very moment. Maybe now it's worth saying this. When she made up her mind and turned to her future husband as a partner, the prince's eyes widened. Alexandra realized that the time had come to act. She rose from her seat and extended her hand and offered to help each other for the sake of common safety. Alexandra smiled at her future husband, her cheeks turning pink and her eyes becoming brighter. The man looked at the princess in surprise. He was very surprised by this word partner, and he asked if she knew what it meant. To which the girl, beaming, asked if he didn't know what a political marriage was. The man exhaled, and rising from his seat, he said that of course he knew and shook his bride's hand. Alexandra, smiling, said that she thought their relationship would be good. Deprived of any love as business partners, he asked what about the other. Theodore asked if she didn't want something besides this. The girl looked at her partner in surprise. She was a little confused about what exactly Prince Theodore meant, and her cheeks turned a little red. And the next moment she joyfully announced that yes, she had a great idea for a business. Theodore looked displeasedly at his bride, and she, embarrassedly again, began to wave her hand and say that she did not have the entrepreneur's disease, and said that she was looking at the truth. She sighed heavily and said that her plan was really good, and thought that when the chance would come, it was probably worth telling him when he would trust him more. Suddenly, following the corridors of the palace around the corner, she met the knight who had previously knocked on her maid. The unpleasant man puffed up the nostrils of his large nose and loudly asked the princess where she was going, that she was returning so late. Since she came to Airugo, she should behave properly. Frowning with rage and breathing noisily, he thought that because of this princess he had received a reprimand from the Surjan women. He thought what would happen to his reputation. He should intimidate her so that she would not leave again. Out of surprise, the girl took several steps back, but her groom did not let her fall. He came up from behind and hugged her shoulder. The knight became worried. His voice trembled and he asked why His Highness Theodore was here. The man was angry. The man began to walk with long steps towards the knight, who stepped back in fear. The unpleasant man said that these were the internal affairs of Sylvanus, and he should not pay his attention to this. Mentally, he asked the princess what they should do. He contorted his whole face in concern and clenched his teeth. With his gaze, he ordered her to quickly calm this barbarian. Princess Alexandra spread her hands in surprise, not understanding why she should do this. Prince Iarugo was terribly angry. He glared at the knight and said, "Okay, but this concerns his bride." A man with dirty yellow hair looked in horror at the barbarian, who was a head taller than them and trembled in fear. A man with long black hair pierced the knight with bright golden eyes and said that a dog that grins at its master is useless. The next moment, the prince of the kingdom of Airugo emotionlessly kicked the knight of the Sylvanus Empire, so much so that he flew across the deflection quite far away. The knight who swore at the princess fell face down on the floor. The prince looked emotionlessly at the one whom he had easily defeated, and Alexandra rated the blow at 20 points. The next moment, Theodore walked up to the lying knight and pressed his head to the floor with his foot. The man was indignant and said that he was a knight of the great empire of Sylvanus, and he would file an official protest. The prince said in surprise that he understood this. Then he turned his head sharply towards the princess and said, "He is his bride's dog, so it is better for his owner to decide." The formed couple locked eyes, and Theodore wondered what the princess would do. Alexandra was surprised. The knight, who was pressed to the floor, shouted what the princess was doing and told her to tell him to quickly remove his leg. He breathed loudly through his huge nostrils and wondered irritably why she was in no hurry to pacify him, but only looked confused and called the princess stupid. Alexandra looked at this scene in surprise